Welcome to Gazzang's video training, where today we have a replay of a recent online event put on by Gazzang and GoGrid. Sit back and enjoy listening to Mike Frank, Vice President of Products at Gazzang, and Phil Gavlan, Solution Architect at GoGrid, as they talk about the essentials of data security in the cloud. Due to the length of this webinar, we have separated the video into 3 parts. This is part 1.
Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to talk about some essentials of data security in the cloud. I want to thank everyone for joining us. It looks like we have a lot of people from all over the globe, and again, I just want to thank you for taking the time today to learn about this important security issue in the cloud. Before we get started, I'd just like to give some brief introductions and go over some basic housekeeping. My name is Maria Gallegos. I am one of the product marketing managers here at GoGrid, and today we have with us Mike Frank, VP of Products at Gazzang, and Phil Gavlan, one of our solution architects here at GoGrid. This webinar will be about 30 minutes in duration, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So whenever you have a question, please feel free to use the question widget. We'll track all the questions and then we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mike Frank, who's going to give us our agenda today, and we'll go ahead and get started. Mike?
Today we're going to cover a lot of things. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you may have as far as going into the cloud. And some of those challenges are around security and the risks that may be there. They may be around how you become compliant to the various regulations that may apply to your company. But also, we're not just going to point out the challenges, but we're also going to give you the solutions, or some of the solutions towards that. So part of that is about protecting your applications. It's certainly about protecting data, how you defend from these threats, for the security risks, and how you protect your network. Now, like everything out there, the cloud has both rewards and there are certainly some concerns. And so really I want to focus on the concerns in this webinar, but first we'll talk about the rewards. So obviously, being able to scale up and down, be able to be agile and bring servers up and get to market quicker, being able to rely on the service-oriented aspects of the cloud where you don't have to worry about some of the things, the infrastructure underneath. From a cost model, certainly it's nice, pay-as-you-go, like a utility, basically. There's cost-sharing benefits as a result of it. There's nice aspects as far as it being service-level driven and high availability driven, and a lot of times you don't get those types of things internally like you would from an external vendor. Also, just the automation and ability to really define workflows that you couldn't maybe not normally do. And then certainly there's the maintenance. So putting that maintenance, some of the things that really don't add value to what your company does onto somebody that really is an expert at it. So there are also, and if you look at the polls, certainly concerns around the cloud. The main concerns are really around information security, around ensuring privacy. There's also concerns around data location. So there's regulations that require data only be within certain regional boundaries in the Americas or in Europe or in APAC or something like that. Also, there's concerns around data migration and how you move data into the cloud, but also how you move it out of the cloud. And then there are the legal aspects, ensuring that really you're compliant to regulations and that you can take advantage of various safe harbor, that you're really acting responsibly. So if we're looking at the cybersecurity aspects, then part of what we look at is really the threat agents. And so the typical ones, right, and these aren't cloud only, but the typical ones are really internal, so it's your own employees, right? So they're certainly one of the bigger threat agents. Externally, and unfortunately this continues to grow, so hackers, more and more organized crime or government entities, and so you may have things that you need to protect from those type of external threats. And then as well, people are partnering more and more. IT resources tend to get shared out a bit more as we automate things, and so certainly our partners can be a threat agent as well. They've got more privileges. Now on the attack vectors, again, if folks can get an OS login, then really, they can do a lot. They can steal your data. They can do a lot of things. Or if they can get to files on storage. If they are able to get into the network, they can sniff things. On the injection side, certainly SQL injection or other type of injection attacks on a web server can allow them to get through and into resources. And more of the frameworks there to build applications, help you prevent injection, but it's still a problem. Buffer overflows, less and less of that. Again, software has evolved. Still ever present, and and still as big a problem as it ever been as social engineering. So you have to train your employees to understand how to verify they know who they're talking to, what sort of information they share. Coding practices, writing good code to prevent things like injection, but also to protect that code. Codes can have various information in it that can allow folks to get deeper into your infrastructure. And then malware, viruses, Trojans, all those things have to be avoided to really be secure. On the regulation side, really, more and more there are nations are driving privacy laws, and there are targeted industries, healthcare, for example, where personal data is central. So HIPAA, high tech in the healthcare side, have requirements about data protection, and have specifications of what you have to do to really get, legally have safe harbor and protecting that data. GLBA, CFR 11, there's various things there. And then industry leaders themselves, and so the primary one that comes to mind is certainly the payment card industry standard. And so really, this applies to anybody that handles payment card data, and that's just about every company anymore is doing payment card transactions. On the payment card side, really there's 6 areas that they cover, and these are good reminders of what we have to do from a security standpoint, right? So we have to make sure access controls are in place. We have to protect our data through things like encryption. We have to manage vulnerabilities. We have to make sure systems are patched. We have to protect our network with things like firewalls. We have to do proper monitoring and look at our logs. And we have to have proper security policies in place so that we know how that we're going to operate infrastructures. So what data is vulnerable? Well, I really like to talk about 2 different types of data. One's really the direct data, and this is the more obvious stuff. And so it's the actual files that make up a website, or the files that sit underneath a database. Everything in the end ends up, really sitting in a file and ultimately down on storage. And that storage can be disk, it could be tape. And disk, I mean in a very general term. But the indirect side is just as important, because often there's data that points to other data. You have to have a connection to a database in your application, and those contain usernames and passwords. They contain keys to encrypt and decrypt data. And then there's that parades across the various levels of a stack that you're going out there to protect, whether it's firewalls, web server, application middleware, data caching servers, really anything that's out there. So, number one job in the end, and sort of the last line of defense, is really to protect that sensitive data. On the database side, right, so we've got MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, so sort of on the open source side, again, all the data is in files. And so those tables or table spaces or key spaces or whatever it may be called for the particular technology stores the raw data. And if you can get to that file, and then you can usually get the data, because it's either in a format that can easily be read as is, or with some commands like strings, or it can be brought up in another instance on another server somewhere using the same tool or application. But then also there's things like log files where the query files show all the data that's going in. They'll show an insert statement with all the values going into the insert statement, or they'll show passwords for a password reset, things like that. And then there's tools certainly also for the transaction logs, binary logs, all those types of things contain data. Also, configuration files up in the open source side will just contain username and password. So again, powerful users that get access to operating system can find these and can see it and can connect into a database. And then finally, backup files exports. Data is data, and whether it's in an actively on disk, or it's in a backup file or an export or a dump or whatever you want to call it, it's still the data, and that's still an easy way to steal it. And often data leaks out that way. So where is the data in the file system vulnerable? Well, if you're a user on the operating system, obviously you can get to files, and especially if you're root on a Linux system, you can get to any file on that system. But then also there's data going across a communication network, so there's ways to eavesdrop on that. There's storage communications, so there's ways to eavesdrop between hardware and storage as well. You can get copies of virtual images, and again, clouds run on virtualized technology, and whether those images are active or inactive, some data will be in there. And then there's other ways to access storage often as well. So, and then bottom line too, people can steal physical storage devices, so they can steal disks.
You have just completed part 1 of our 3-part video, Gazzang and GoGrid's webinar, Essentials of Data Security in the Cloud. Please check our website, www.gazzang.com, for information on the other parts of this video. If you would like more information, please contact Gazzang.